All right, all right, all right. I am Jeff Townsend, and I am excited to go down this new journey with my good friend here. Let me give you a little bit of an introduction to him, even though he doesn't need one. I'm going to give it a shot here. So, this is the artist formerly known as many names. Let me go through him here: Crash the Terminator, the Laughing Man, the Man of Question, Hugh Morris, of course, that's a great one. Well traveled. You've wrestled all around the world. You've ECW, WCW, WWE, WWF, and of course, you used to be the head trainer at the developmental system. To break it down, it would be known as NXT. You are the man, the myth, the legend, Bill DeMott.
I am at least three of those things you said. Yes, I am. How you doing, man?
Could anybody top that intro there? I felt pretty good about
That's the bet. Like the only ones you're missing are the all-time favorites. Big Sweet William when I first started, and then Crash and of course we can't forget General Hugh G. Rection.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah, we'd like to forget that one.
And as you can see, he has Who Let the Dogs Out in your background.
Did you see them just stroll across the screen there?
That dog is huge.
In the mansion.
I did. That's a big dog.
That's my little one, and here comes my big one. And he's like, I don't think you can really appreciate the size of this machine next to me. He's a good boy. He's a puppy. So he's my
he's your right hand man right now.
He's my right hand man. He stays and makes sure I'm always up to something good. But I'm excited about this, man. I think we're gonna have a lot of fun. I have a renewed energy coming into this year, and it's I think we're gonna do some good stuff here, and hopefully we get some people involved, and get some questions coming as we keep continuing to do this. But this is awesome, man.
I think that this is really like a relaunch, Bill, because you've done a lot of things under this Bill DeMott Experience before.
Yeah.
So we're giving it a go ahead. Like you said, you got new energy, you're re-energized. And just to kind of break down what we're going to be doing, because this is the first episode, we're going to be talking about a lot of the things that you're doing today. Yeah. Then, of course, hey, you're forever known for your connections with wrestling, right? So we'll talk about your opinions on the product now, and we'll also deep dive into your side of things that you were part of historically. So, like I said, knowing a lot about you, I'm excited to do this. So.
Great. I feel like we have at least 2 episodes worth of information. That's me being sarcastic. I think we have.
Oh, I think I can dig up some more than that. I can get a little fired up.
We got a good 30 years worth of stuff to do. Yeah, when I did the Bill DeMott Experience back in 2015, it was a YouTube show. Actually, the show itself was being shopped at. The Discovery Channel had interest in it. And what I used to do is I traveled around and spoke to coaches, people that, did things in life. I spent so many years as a coach, and the last part of my career is, heading the developmental system. So it gave me a chance to go outside of what I did and meet other people that were either training people or guiding people in a certain way or doing some great things. And I'm sure we'll talk about this every once in a while, but just at that time of life in 2015, things really went upside down personally. So the Bill DeMott Experience was on hold for a little bit, but I'm always excited to talk about. Like, I know 2 things, and I can only talk about one of them on the air, and that's wrestling. The rest is the rest is up to interpretation. But I'm excited, and the Bill DeMott Experience. At the end of every episode or show we do, I hope everybody leaves like with a smile on their face, and then starts thinking about, wow, I didn't know that, or well, there's a different way of looking at things. So I'm excited, man. I'm really excited, and with you at the wheel, all I gotta do is point and say,
yeah, I'm like the quarterback, and you're the fullback, the running back, the defense. You're everything else.
I'm Lyle Alzado.
This. So, Bill, let's start it off. Everybody's wondering, a lot of people, what the hell have you been up to, man? You've got a big gap in time here since you've been out of the wrestling industry.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of great work you've been doing from turning a tragedy into something that's life-changing and benefits other people. So I condemn you for that. I'll let you talk about that a little bit, because some of the listeners might not know it's possible, everything that you've been going through and what you've accomplished in the last several years.
Yeah, well, thanks, man. So like 2015 was my departure from like the wrestling, the official wrestling business, you know. Um, and I'm sure we'll get into that every week or however we handle it. But you know, so what happens is, you know, out of sight, out of mind, especially in wrestling. So it's funny because I just did right before the new year. I did an appearance at the old ECW arena. And so a lot of the guys, and you know, I keep in contact with a lot of the boys, and that including the women. You know, so you keep in contact with you know, students you had, people you trained, guys that you went up and down the road with. And it's funny because people come there and go, "I can't believe you're here. I thought you were dead." And
Oh,
I heard that a couple of different times, and I'm like, I come home and I tell my wife, I'm like, yeah. The guy says, "Oh yeah, I came here because they said you're here, and I thought you were dead." I'm like, well, why do they think? Because if you're out of sight, you're out of mind, you know. And then you
well,
get
in the
wrapped up.
wrestling industry, Bill kind of has that. A lot of people do go too soon. So I mean,
Yeah, yeah. And for whatever reason, if they don't hear about you, it's like you don't exist anymore. And I'd like to say I'm okay with that, but I'm not, because I really enjoy. I try to do. I've tried to do at least 2 to 3 seminars a year. You know, 2 or 3 day seminars. I love doing appearances. So when someone does get in touch with me, I do my best to make sure I make that appearance or go see the fans. And because it's truly what I miss about the business. I think you hear this a lot. Is the guys, is the locker room, is the people that you went up and down with, and people that you either trained with or saw train, or had something to do with. And so that's the biggest thing. And then for me, you get caught up in, lack of a better term, the real world. You know, when you're out of that, there's either your career goes a different way or things like that. Unfortunately, my career didn't go a different way. My lifestyle went a different way. Um, in 2015, my middle daughter was tragically killed by a drunk driver, a multiple offender. 3 times
mm,
prior to taking my daughter's life, he had been arrested for DUI. So my journey changed, and so I've been working. And when I say I mean my family, and we started a foundation, and I've just been running that foundation 7 days a week, now for 7 years. And then you know, you try to get out there and meet people, and I think we assume that because we're on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, or you know, ticking the talk and all those great things, that you know, people kind of stay up with you. But I find that the wrestling fans, if it's not wrestling, they don't stay up with it. You know, they're
yeah,
kind of just, and there's nothing wrong with that. They're just, that's their gig. So I think when people see me in public, or I'm at an appearance or something, and you tell them what you're doing, they're blown away by that. And you
yeah,
know, we so much appreciate people's prayers and support and condolences, but I find it odd at this day and age that 7 years after, there's people that don't know what you're doing. And that's why this show, this podcast is going to be so important, because we get to catch up with people and we get to reach them again. And you know, for lack of a better word, I'm doing great. And it was, like I said, it was really good to be out in Philadelphia a couple weeks ago, and hopefully that opens a door for me to, for people who realize, like, I'm not gone. You know, I'm still out there doing that thing, but my main focus is the foundation, and all that stuff. So I just thought it was kind of weird when people said, "Wow, I thought you were dead," and like, you don't want to hear that. you
yeah,
definitely you definitely
yeah,
don't want to
yeah.
hear that.
Like I said, and this the industry that you were involved in is notorious, unfortunately, for early deaths. I mean,
Yeah,
and so that's a legitimate. That could actually be a legitimate concern for somebody.
sure. Yeah. And the surprise on their face when they come see you, go, "Wow, would you sign?" Yeah, I'd love to sign it. But they're more excited, I think, that I was actually there, you know,
Yeah,
and that sounds like conceited, but I genuinely feel good when people know I'm okay, and they're concerned of like, "Wow, you're here. Like, oh yeah,
It's Hugh
me.
Morris. It's Hugh
Yeah.
Morris. Dang it.
It's me. I'm here. You just
So let
can't.
me ask you
It's
something.
just funny, those cats that come up to you that in your heart, they got to be at least 10 years older than you. And they sit there and say, I remember watching you when I was in grade school. You lie. And that's why I make everybody pull out their license. I
Yeah.
wonder how old you are. And they got me by 10 years. I go, I wasn't even in high school when you were watching wrestling.
Man, what does that say? Wow. Oh, no.
I'll tell you, it's an eclectic group of people that come out to see it. It's really cool.
So, Bill, the tragedy happened. How long did it take you before you started what you're doing now? Because I know there's a mourning period, but at what point did you realize, like, this is what I want to do? And then how long after did you start doing it?
I don't think so. For for clarity purposes, I don't want to do this. I didn't want to do it. I don't want to do it. I don't have to do it. We as a family, we're surrounded by good people. My church, my immediate family, my best friends. I've grown up, been with them 50 years of my life, and we started to meet people that were affected in the same way. And I had an opportunity one time to speak to a bunch of students, and 1,500 students stayed and got in line to either shake my wife's hand, hug my daughter, or give me a hug. But they shared stories about how they were affected by something. And that's who Carrie is. Carrie was a people person. We get jaded as athletes, performers, entertainers, whatever we're known as. We get kind of jaded to the real world because while we appreciate everyone, our downtime is our downtime. And for me, my whole career, I hid when I was home. I tried to stay out of the public. You wouldn't see me shopping. You wouldn't see me in restaurants or anything like that. So it was very unusual for me to step out into that thing of meeting people and start speaking to kids. And my wife said, well, it's instead of waiting for people to contact you, it's time for us to do what we need to do. So we started the foundation almost to a year to date of the tragedy. So by October of 2016, the foundation was formed in Florida. And since that time, I have spoken to over 100,000 students. We've reached tens of thousands of law enforcement officers and first responders. We've traveled the country now. But it goes back to it's not what I want to do. So everybody knows, like, I have no problem really putting my business out there a lot of times, unless it's really absurd. But so everybody knows, this is volunteer work. This foundation is volunteer work. And I do it 7 days a week. I'm in our office 12 hours a day. We have victim services that run 24 hours. So if someone needs to reach us, we're available. And so all this is, and it's not meant for any other thing, but for everybody to realize how important this truly is. I haven't brought a paycheck home in almost 7 years. And that's blessings from God and my wife working and the support we have that allows me to spend the time to kind of try to help others not go through this, or people that have been through it, try to help them out. And I've always said, and I've said this in a few different interviews, it all comes back to wrestling, because without wrestling, without 30 years in my back pocket, I don't think I ever could have stood up in front of people and talked and, kind of expressed myself in a certain way. But I learned over the years that you don't look at people's faces, you look above their heads and you don't see them. And so I address, we've been in front of people from 3,500 in attendance to 50 in attendance. And so that's what I do. And when we're not traveling and speaking, we're working on legislature here in Florida and now in New Jersey, and we just announced our chapter in Alabama. So we have 3 recognized chapters, nationally recognized, Florida, New Jersey, Alabama, and I'm sure there's more to come because there's people out there that need help, and there's people out there that have a lot to offer other than sitting and just trying to deal with loss by themselves. That's
Yeah.
that's the serious part of Bill DeMott.
Well, I mean, I think it's kind of, you take wrestling, and a lot of people when they get out of wrestling, they don't know what to do
Yeah,
with themselves. A lot of them don't even, and I actually get this from, I listened to a interview earlier with Chris Masters,
yeah,
as you would know him. And he was with Chris Van Vliet. He was just stating that he dropped out of high school to do this, to wrestle. And he didn't have a lot of the life skills he realized when the pandemic hit. He was like, I'm going to go get some education. I'm going to learn some things. So it's cool that you can take some things out of this, like your ability to speak in the public to make a difference and turn it into something positive post your career with professional wrestling.
yeah. I had written a book about that first half of my life, like leading up to when I was out of wrestling. Excuse me. So I dabbled in a little bit of being an author, and when I was done in 2015, I was shooting an independent movie. I'd done some Ford commercials, and you have opportunities where people know you and go, hey, would you like to do this? So I had the whole manager, and I was doing auditions, and I was making money doing things outside of wrestling. But it all stems from wrestling. It all stems from I don't think the Bill DeMott of 30 something years ago would ever get in front of a camera, and whether it's a Ford commercial or whether it's just voiceover work or whatever, anything. And now speaking to 100,000 students, that doesn't happen without wrestling. Fortunately for me, I have some background in education, but I have a ton of life experience,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what I try to bring to the table. And I think that helps. I know that helps the people that we deal with, is not hearing something from a book or something that's kind of trained to say. You're getting firsthand knowledge and experience from that, and that's kind of always the way I treated wrestling too, was just my experience, my knowledge, and however we can make that work.
Yeah, and I'm
Complicated,
super.
man.
Yeah, it is, but then again, it's for all the right reasons though. And
Yeah,
and we are going to talk a lot about wrestling as well, but that's the important thing, is that's not what defines you. You kind of have this reputation. If you just watch the Tough Enough, what Bill DeMott needed to be on Tough Enough,
yeah,
it's not the guy that I've come to know here. You're like a big teddy bear, man. You're not this just out, I mean, reputation's a full, always out of control, yelling,
yes,
screaming. In the day, you are a family man.
yeah,
And you're putting in work for a good cause, beyond, way beyond, more important
yeah.
than professional wrestling.
I think people need to know that about a lot of the cats in this business. Be, our job when the red light is on, we know our job. My job in Tough Enough was to be that guy. Unfortunately, what happens is whether you're a youngster growing up watching the business and Tough Enoughs and all these things, you have a preconceived notion of who people are. And
Yeah.
I've heard the same thing said about Stone Cold. You watch Stone Cold on our last episodes of Tough Enough, and people go, well, that guy's not cool. He's a complete hard ass and all these things. It couldn't be farther from the truth. But when the red light's on, you have a job. When my job was specifically, you go after them as it pertains to Tough Enough. The issue, the cool thing was, after the show was over and all those kids got to know me as the person, not their trainer for 10 hours a day for 3 months. And that's, we didn't socialize with those kids in any season or anything whatsoever. So you got to know them, and they're like, wow, like, you're a real person. And then
Yeah.
the issue going forward is, every time you come back, people already have a preconceived notion of who you are until they get a chance to sit down like this, or or do something. But there's a ton of cats in this business that have so much to offer, and people just have a preconceived notion. And I chalk it up to, that means I did my job. I've always looked at it that way. Like, if people hate me or are afraid of me or talk about what a hard ass I am, and they've never done anything with me, then I've done my job, because I put it in their head, and they know on the visual thing of visually seeing me right then and there, they've decided who I am. So that's who they get.
And that's what we're going to do with this podcast and video. We're recording on Boomcaster, by the way. My friends have an awesome platform here. But that's what we're going to do on this. We're going to try to deep dive into you more. You said to me, hey, I'm an open book. Ask me whatever. We're going to get more, in another episode, we'll get more into the tough enough stuff. And you're an honest guy. And this is part of that for me. And what I want to get across to people is more of Bill DeMott, not Bill DeMott, the wrestler. But then again, I think it's important that we hear your side of a lot of things that happen in the professional wrestling industry.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's a huge interest. So I'm excited, like I said. And I do want to say one more thing, though. I was actually arguing with somebody on Reddit, Bill, semi-recently, about you before I'd even spoke to you, actually.
Uh-oh.
They were very upset with your comments on removing Sonny from the Hall of Fame because of the incidents with the DUIs. But they also did not know what had happened to you. They just see these Bill DeMott dirt sheet comments about Bill DeMott wanting her out of the Hall of Fame. And for me, I had known what had happened. So of course I'm in there getting my myself downvoted constantly, sticking up for you. But you don't want to get on Reddit if you haven't. It's an interesting place.
I'm not going to get on that one, but yeah, you've clearly, some people think you've picked the wrong side.
I also go in the AEW one, and they don't always like what I say either. So I'm like negative 500 karma on Reddit.
Oh, we're going to get along so great.
But no, so I think my point is, Bill, though, that there's two things on that. Obviously, your passion for what you're doing right now. But on the flip side of that, it's also like you look at this professional wrestling industry as a platform, as some sort of role model approach. Like, you're being in the Hall of Fame means something to you.
Yeah.
I mean, you may not be there, but that symbolizes that to you is something so significant that the image portrayed should be of somebody who is living by a good example. But that would eliminate a lot of people in the Hall of Fame, unfortunately.
And that's a great point. And I think a lot of people got bent out of shape because, oh, how come you're not talking about this one or that one? That platform for me, and to briefly go back, you remember what happened with Hogan years ago? They erased him from everything.
Yep.
So how do I reach the wrestling community? Listen, I've known Tammy since she was a kid. I've had no issues with Tammy, the person. I know she's gone through a lot of things, and I'm not here on this platform. I don't stand on a soapbox. I never point fingers, and I never judge anyone. Never, ever. What she's going through is what she's going through. But on the numerous 9th time when a life is taken, how do you bring that to light? You touch on wrestling. This happened to deal with wrestling. Now, if people follow the same thing, I say the same about the NFL, Major League Baseball, the NBA, Tiger Woods, anybody who has celebrity, and we all have some limit of celebrity, but she was now arrested here in Florida, by the way, where I do the majority of my advocacy work and working with legislature and things. So I have two options. Let it go because we're brothers, we're co-workers, we're wrestlers. You're a Hall of Famer. I need to respect that. Or do you bring it to light and bring the wrestling community into it and say, you have to see what's going on here? And then I'll throw another wrench in it because people have said to me, how dare you? And I say, how would you like to be at a show and that person is driving? You're coming from a wrestling show and heaven forbid something happened to you because a wrestler was drunk driving or impaired driving or something like that. So, and this isn't just something I brought up and said, take her out of the Hall of Fame. I've been at every court date. I've been in the court physically because my intentions are not to let a repeat offender walk away after taking at least one life. And that's where that came from. So how do you, in wrestling terms, how do I stir the pot? Well, it's very easy. Get her out of the Hall of Fame. And to your point, if you went by character and everything else, that'd be a very shallow Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
But we're talking about wrestling, and I'm not saying anything about a wrestling. I said, and it got the dander up of not only WWE universe, but the wrestling community got pissed off. And they got pissed off down the middle. Some were pissed off because of what's happened, and some were pissed off because I asked for her to be out of the Hall of Fame. I don't care if she's in the Hall of Fame. I need to bring attention to what's happening now. But then how do you set the tone for all these up and comers? Why is it okay for people because they have celebrity or because they have because they have a past and all these things and what they've done in the past? Why is it okay for them to do this? It wasn't okay the other 7 times she got stopped either. But when do we stand up and go, now there's lives being taken because of this decision? So my decision was, and it was one that was talked about in this house very at length, because we know the effects of once you piss off a wrestling community, there's only 2 sides. They're going to hate you. And so we don't get it twisted. I've had death threats. I've had people cussing my family and saying things about my daughter. They don't know what they're really saying. And you have to let that roll off. You have to be a duck in water, right? You have to let that stuff roll off your back. So I've taken a beating on it a little bit, but I've also raised the awareness of a lot of people. And so, that's the journey. And unfortunately, the same thing with Jeff Hardy. Now, Matt and I had a couple side conversations because I did not attack Matt or Jeff's character. I talked about the repeat DUI offender, not Jeff Hardy, the character, the entertainer, the sports entertainer, the professional wrestler. I'm talking about Jeffrey Nero Hardy, the repeat DUI offender. And so people go, well, now he's just going to jump. Yeah, I am going to jump on everybody. I am going to jump. And I take it very personally when people in the business that I've been in with them, before them, and around them have the colossal gall to just think that it doesn't affect anybody else. Every time I see a wrestler in that situation, I'm affected by that.
Yeah, you bring up a great point, and those are obviously influential characters, Sonny, right?
Yeah.
I born in '86, so obviously, being a young boy, I knew her. But also, Jeff Hardy was huge to me. That was like the turn of wrestling, and really is somebody that you look up to. So there's that side of it too. You guys play a lot. You wear a lot of hats, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, and that is something that, aside from any offense, really, is something that shouldn't be taken lightly. And it's the same issue that I have with the NFL. The NBA's got a lot better. It was rough there for a while, but the NFL has a lot of problem with this. And I see exactly what you're saying. It's entertainment, but you are on a stage and platform that is impacting people.
Right. Do your thing. But when it impacts the community and it impacts people outside, hell, let's be honest. I went after the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, because her husband was DUI and tried to get out of it and make it so it didn't happen. So this is, unfortunately for me, this is the journey I'm on, and I'm going to bring light to every situation like that. And I'm not just a guy who sits on the computer and goes, oh, I read this on TMZ and let me just publish it and have an opinion. I'm in the courtrooms.
Yeah.
I'm spending time with those families. The Lassiter family has been dealing with this for over a year, while Tammy's court dates keep getting pushed back. They keep prolonging. So what happens to those families? Well, what does Bill know? He's just, I'm just the guy who reads it on TMZ. No, I'm in the courtrooms. I'm working with the family. I'm working with the Volusia County prosecutor. The idea is how do we stop this from continuing to happen? Where's the accountability? And so back to the original point, the wrestling community loves or hates you every day by what you do or say that day. If I came out and I don't know, had a 3-headed baby and named it, Crash, Hugh Morris, and Rection, I'd be everybody'd love me again because, oh, look what he did, terrible analogy, but something
Yeah.
goofy like that puts you back in the favor of people. But I'm not in the business now of entertaining people with this. I don't find it entertaining. So that's the, probably a bad way to say it, but that's the cross I bear now in the wrestling community. So, and I know a lot of the boys steer away from me because they don't want to be looped into that. Do your thing. I'm not, like I said, I'm not throwing stones. There's not a perfect bone in my body. There's nothing I haven't done or haven't thought about doing. But hopefully we learn as we go, and you try to fix things. And that's the point. Nine times. And now someone's, lives have been changed. So someone's got to stand up, and we just tend to sweep it under the rug and well, hopefully they get help. But what about the family that's been affected? They have no help now. Their journey's done, and so that's where I come in. And again, it goes back to lessons I've learned over 30 years in this business.
That was important for me to bring up, Bill. I did want to touch up on that. I didn't know if you spoke about that more in detail, but I wanted to make sure you had the platform to do so. Before we segue into more of the back half of this episode, we'll talk about your opinions on current product.
Okay.
But I did want to give you the time to do that. So
cool. Thank you, man.
Yeah, no problem.
It's a journey.
Yeah. So you and I talk a little bit about the current product as we've talked here a little bit back and forwards. I have a lot that I agree with you on. Is it everything? I don't know, but my job is to present things to you here and get a reaction from you and your opinion on it. So that's what we're going to do here.
Okay.
It's changed a lot since you've been in it. I actually want to kick this off. You're going to call me the devil's advocate, which I'm fine with that. I want to read you a quote from Kenny Omega. It says, and this was I think it was about 5 years ago-ish, Bill. I want to say maybe 6 even. And this was what he was talking about, your training philosophy. And just to quote it, and there is more to the quote, but I'm not going to read it all. I think he understood the power plant philosophy. He wasn't the greatest pro wrestling teacher. So, Bill, when I read that, a couple things come to my mind, like, well, what the hell's pro wrestling then? Like, is pro wrestling something different now?
Yeah.
I'm not just reading this to piss you off, but like, what? It made me think, what the hell's pro wrestling? Like, what does that even mean? Like, does that mean that Bill DeMott can't do a lariat or some crazy swan? I mean, like, I'm just confused when I read something like that, when I hear something like that.
It's it's funny because I think Kenny just came out and did another interview talking about his early experience with WWE and how it wasn't for him. Kenny didn't spend a lot of time with us in Deep South. He wasn't there very long. Clearly he wasn't unhappy because he had a vision of what he wanted to do. And early on, you knew he was an entertainer. I said from the beginning, and here's the cool thing about me, I keep everything I've ever done. I learned that a long time ago. So I keep every report, every email, every training tape. I have a storage unit that I should probably just get rid of, but it's just that thing I've done. That's, as a coach, that's what you do. But Kenny wasn't really happy with the way he was being asked to do things. Turns out Kenny wasn't happy with wrestling. I think in his latest interview, his perception of wrestling wasn't what he thought it was, and it wasn't for him, at least in the WWE standard way of doing things. And you got that a lot early on from the independent kind of guys that were just starting out, because they, and I say to this day, if you're making money doing what you do and you love what you do, don't come to a camp where you're going to learn the WWE way, because it's going to take everything away from you and then give it back. but can you subscribe to this mentality, this thing we do? So as far as when Kenny came to Deep South wasn't there like the performance center where you're there getting groomed. Deep South was there for guys that had some kind of knowledge, that needed to get into 20-foot ring shape, that needed to understand the mentality of how they like to do their TVs. And there's just certain guys who don't want to change what they do. So when they're unhappy, it's like anything else. They go out and say or do or whatever else. It's funny because I have his parting letter to John Laurinaitis. I have it in a file. It's just he was unhappy. He was away from home, his girlfriend or whatever. But I've heard it before and Kenny's made no bones about jumping all over me as a person and a coach for years. But to be honest, he didn't spend that much time with me. So I don't really hold that much. It doesn't hold that much water with me. It's just, when people leave, they get to say and do what they want. And if you have a following and, people jump on that, and people who don't know go, yeah, and that and this and that. And so I have no ill will towards him. He had to do what he had to do. I wish he wouldn't have gilded the lily and put all of it on me and just came out when he started burying me on the internet, came out and said, listen, it just wasn't for me. And I didn't gel with DeMott. I didn't realize him and I had a problem, except for when he tried to wear a plunger on his head in the middle of a TV taping. That was the issues with Kenny. He wanted to do crazy stuff.
Yeah,
so
he's kind of paved his own path too. But back to my original point, obviously professional wrestling is different for others. It's different for Kenny Omega. He's kind of paved his own way. Yeah. But when I hear that comment, that made me think well, that's professional wrestling, something different to Kenny. And he's paved his own way with it for sure.
Yeah, and he's done a great job. Kenny wasn't there for the traditional way to get in this business. Athletic, inventive. He wanted to do crazy things and get people to react. It's just like when he went years ago and he wrestled that little girl in Japan. It was the biggest thing going. That's who he is and what he does. And he's very good at what he does. And he's a hell of an athlete. I said years ago, and I'll stand by it, I said he was the next Chris Jericho. I'm a big fan of Kenny Omega. I can't help it. He's not a fan of me or what he perceived I was going to do or did. But I think professional wrestling means different things to different people. And unfortunately, when you get asked to join, pulled in, and by the way, paid, you're not training and paying your way, you're getting paid to learn a certain way of doing things. And that theory didn't change back in the early 90s when Omega was there. It didn't change in the 2000s when Seth Rollins and Dean Ambrose were there. It didn't change when Sami Zayn came in. It didn't change when Pac came in. It didn't change when Charlotte came in. It didn't change when Sheamus came in and Wade and all these other guys. The theory has not changed. It's just if you're going to be there, learn what they're asking of you, and then become who you want to be. That's where the trust is. But that we can talk about that forever, and I'm sure we will. But yeah, I like I said, people have a platform, and I really wish they'd use it on something more than just saying, "Hey, Bill DeMott, he made me work too hard."
Well, okay, let's continue to segue with that thought. Okay. Professional wrestling has changed since you got into it. 80s, going on towards the late 80s, and you have been a well-traveled man. I actually want to kick this next part off with reading you some stats from Dave Meltzer's Wrestling Observer newsletter, historical data here that I collected. And may I add that Dave does have me blocked on Twitter. I made a couple comments that upset him, one of which was, I don't remember what match it was, but I said if it was in the Tokyo Dome, it would be 7 stars. And the second comment I said was, Dave Meltzer says I'm in the key demo. That was the one that did me in and got me blocked.
And that was the one that got you blocked.
I'm still paying for this guy's newsletter. So let me read some interesting stats for you here, Bill.
Okay.
So this is, like I said, I collected it. So let's talk 5-star matches by decade. So in the 80s, there were 24. 90s, there were 65. This is 5+ star, by the way, right? Because he obviously does exceed that. 5 star. The 2000s, that era, we're down to 7. 2010 to 2020 or 2019, 67. Then here's the interesting part, Bill. Since the year 2020, 54 5+ star matches that David Meltzer's rated. And he's been doing this for 40 years now. And let me continue this a little bit more. Individuals with the most 5-star matches. 29-year-old Will Ospreay. I don't know if you've ever watched him perform. Great performer.
Yes, I have. Yeah.
Yeah, he is. He actually tied in the lead. He has 25 matches rated that high. Kenny Omega has 20, according to the record-setting 7-star match out of the 5-star scale. And this is where it gets weird for me. Ric Flair has 12, and the Young Bucks have 9. New Japan Pro obviously is going to have a significant amount. We know that. That's what Dave likes.
Yeah.
81 of them in the history of it. All Japan Pro, men's and wrestling combined, men and women, combined, 54. Then here's the interesting part, I thought. WWE, WWF, long legacy, obviously, of that promotion, is tied with AEW now for 16 5+ star matches. Then obviously WCW, Ring of Honor at 7 each. So yeah, AEW, Bill, is caught up. Does that mean with WWF all time? So does that mean that we're seeing better wrestling these days?
Well, I'm trying to figure out how to say this. I don't remember seeing Meltzer's first match. Matter of fact, I don't remember any of them. I'm curious if he has any 5-star matches. I don't know how a company, and it's not a shot at AEW, how a company that's just, 3 years old now, has the same amount of 5-star matches as a company that's been running 40 plus years. What is it since Vince has it?
Yeah.
40 plus years?
Yeah.
So it's longer than 40 years. And so 5-star matches, I just find it odd that this guy has such a platform and people hold on to that rating. I don't understand the rating system. I don't understand where it comes from. I don't understand where he draws his information from, because as far as I know, he's never been in the ring. He's never trained, done anything. I know early on I learned of him because Tom Brady used to get his written dirt sheet sent to him in Puerto Rico to read all those things. And that was my introduction to the dirt sheets. So I don't know why we even consider the wrestling business changing because of this rating system. I actually think it's absurd that, okay, if you have that many 5-star matches, you should quit because everything else you do sucks. It's like, if you have the perfect match, leave. What are we aspiring for? What else can we expect from Will Ospreay or Kenny Omega? What else are we supposed to expect? Ric Flair has 12 5-star matches.
5+ star. Yeah. Yeah.
And how many do the Young Bucks have?
They're closing in on them. They have 9. And I suspect after what I watched last night, this is not going to come out in this time, but last night, what I watched with the 7th match of the series of the tag,
so
I assume it's going to be another. That's going to be another one.
I don't know what the prerequisite is for, or the dynamic is for a 5-star match. I don't think it has anything to do with wrestling. I think you're rating, the term is the car crash, right? That's the term everybody uses, like the fast paced, boom, 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 amazing, da 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 da. There's nothing wrong with that style. I just don't understand but this guy gets a lot of airtime about his 5-star and the 7-star matches and all these things. And what was Hogan and Andre got? What, a 2-star?
Yeah.
So I'm confused by it. And every time it's brought up, I sit there and I try to comprehend what's the why is he the measuring stick, or who is he listening to that this is the thing? And then for upcoming young start wrestlers that are on the internet and see this getting 5 stars, well, then everybody's got to be like Will Ospreay or Kenny Omega now. And I think, and here's where I'll get in trouble as being an old guy. Now that's why there's 72 super kicks in every match, and a a pile driver doesn't mean anything, and a DDT doesn't mean anything, and all these things don't mean anything. And so, how's it a 5-star match? By the amount you do in a certain time, or it clearly can't be the physicality, because physicality just keeps going. So I think I feel like it's poisoned the fans. People go, well,
so they're trying to go for but the wrestlers are trying to go for those stars you're thinking.
I don't think necessarily they're trying to get the 5-star rating. I think that because people now follow that more, I mean, maybe it's pressure for them to have to keep doing that, so they don't fall from grace. So it could be a double-edged sword for the performers. But I'm not listen. What was Macho Man and Steamboat in WrestleMania 3? How many stars was that? Do you know offhand?
No, I don't know offhand. I don't want to.
But I guarantee it wasn't 5 stars.
It wasn't 7 stars. I can tell you that.
And what I mean, what is there, a 10-star limit? Where are we at? I mean, I don't.
But here's my thing, Bill, that I get confused, because to me, like you talked about Andre and Hogan.
Yeah.
To me, that was a big moment in the history of wrestling.
Yeah.
And it was executed well, and it was the passing of the torch. So what's the syllabus for being a 5-star match? Because to me, as far as the point and the story that came across there, it was a home run. It was very clear what had happened, and it was executed. So I get confused. If that was the job, then how do you come up with the rating?
They're not. So we'll use, and you hear, I think you hear this a lot. And if you're on social media, people say this a lot. It's, AEW gives you 60 minutes or 120 minutes of nonstop action and all these things, but there's no story. You can't get behind it. You're just coming to watch what they're going to do next. You got guys like Daniel Bryan now who are hopefully going to tell you a good story leading into MJF and all the things that are going on. The bloodline is, I think, is the best story going in wrestling, because They're telling a story. Have any of the bloodline matches gotten 5 stars? Hell no.
No,
Sami
but that
Zayn's never
Survivor
going to get
Series
a 5.
match, a Survivor Series match was Sami Zayn letting Jay do that finisher and putting Kevin Owens down. That was executed to a T. That story was made clear. Hey, he's one of us now. I thought it was executed perfectly. And that's obviously not a 7-star match.
Yeah, I think, but that's the difference. There are, and I think Jericho does it best. There's a fine line between professional wrestling and sports entertainment. There's that fine line, and that 5-star thing has nothing to do with professional wrestling. It has to do with sports entertainment.
Yeah,
I think.
So back to the point, though, how have you seen that evolve since you last wrestled, going back to the mid 2000s when you're dropping power bombs in WWE?
I never even paid attention to that. That wasn't even a conversation. There wasn't even a thought like, what do I need to do to really light up my rankings? I think when you first, there's my knucklehead dogs.
I love it. Dog fight. Dog play.
See, they get worked up too. One's a professional wrestler, one's a sports entertainer. But back to my point, like, we weren't there to those knuckleheads. We weren't thinking about what's going to be my ranking. The only time I ever thought about my ranking as a professional wrestler is when I first broke in the business and the PWI had the top 500.
Yeah.
There was nothing cooler as a kid that was greener than goose shit. Can I say that? I don't want to get in trouble.
Yeah, we can say whatever. Hell.
So, and I try my best not to curse, but it's a wrestling thing. I'm greener than goose shit. I'm trying to learn this craft, and I'm in the same book as Greg the Hammer Valentine and Hulk Hogan and Ultimate Warrior and all these guys in Japan and all these things. So the only 2 times I ever, lack of a better term, marked out for a rankings was the first time when I was in the independents, and then when I made the list when I went to Japan. I personally thought that was cool. It didn't get me any more money. It didn't get me any prestige. It didn't put me higher in the card. It didn't give me extra longevity in my contracts. It didn't give me a bus. It didn't give me first-class tickets. That's something that you take for yourself because you're working hard. And you go, wow, I appreciate it. As you get older in this business, it don't mean nothing. It doesn't mean anything. And if you hold, I think it's cool that people think of you that way. And when you're ranked and all these things, and I love the fact that they still do it. And these up and comers see their name. Yes, that's cool. But this 5-star thing and getting ranked and labeled as this kind of performer or sports entertainer by someone who, I don't know, who makes a living out of a business he's only been involved in behind a keyboard. And so I feel like back in the day, and I won't say it was Meltzer, but there have been people who've been escorted out for writing what they write or ranking it. Like people took that personally. You're going to tell Greg Valentine after a loop that he just had and the storylines he was in and everything he'd done with Tito and everybody else that his matches weren't 5-star. You weren't even allowed in the locker room, in the building, things like that. So a lot of guys didn't pay attention to it. A lot of guys and girls didn't want it around. Now it's a prerequisite to being part of the professional wrestling industry. Is you know, hey, where do you rank? Now what? Now we're not going to ask people how many matches they've had. Hey, what was your last ranking? What, you know, how many stars was your last match? It goes back to, and this is where the old fart in me comes out. Like you say, how long you been doing this? And someone goes, I've been doing this for 20 years. But you had one match a year for 20 years. It doesn't make you a professional wrestler. It makes you someone who's wrestling under a professional banner because someone's running a show. So I know I haven't answered the question, but that's how the business has changed to me. Like you got in it for a reason. And whether it was to become famous or to make lots of money and go on to do something else, become a movie star, or because you had nothing else to do, or you were an athlete that was gifted and they brought you into this business. If you made it here and did well, it's because you loved what you were doing, not because of how you were rated. And listen, Triple H didn't get to where he was because he had 75 4 or 5-star matches. How many 5-star matches has Shawn Michaels had? And then how can they justify him leading this new generation of wrestlers when he has less 5-star matches than the Young Bucks?
Yeah. No, you're right. And you're talking the showstopper, Mr. WrestleMania, right?
Yeah.
Grandest stage of
Here's
them all.
the guy. How many does Undertaker have? How many do, and how dare they keep doing these things if these guys aren't living up to the standard of 5 and 7-star matches?
I agree. So these are supposed to be significant, right? But when you look at it from that point, it doesn't seem so significant.
I would invite Will Ospreay, Kenny Omega, anybody to come on with us and tell us how they financially benefited, how physically, mentally, health-wise they've benefited from this, how their careers benefited because someone's giving them above 4-star matches. If I'm going to go watch Will Ospreay, it's not because of a 5-star rating. It's because of what he does, how he does it, and if I'm invested in what he does. I'm still of the notion of it's storytelling and you've got to capture my attention. I'm not listening to going on a website and go, wow, that got 4 matches. I'm a big fan. Samoa Joe's terrible because he doesn't have any 5-star matches. Amazing big man. Amazing.
Yeah, he is amazing.
So, I don't understand when it happened. It definitely happened while I was still active. I was just in that group of men and women who didn't let that hold water or decide what you were going to do. And I say this to all the youngsters coming up and people that are in it now that are still young and learning the craft as they go. Don't let that be your measuring stick. Don't let that define you, because then you're not wrestling anymore. You're not entertaining. You're trying to, we hear a lot of times in wrestling, you only have to please a crowd of one. And usually people say that about Vince. But if you're doing it just to get a rating, then you're trying to please one guy who's going to give you a 5-star rating that's not going to pay your rent. That's not going to pay your medical bills. It's not going to get you to the next town. That's not going to get you from making $25 to making 25,000. So it's one of those things. Like, I could see if it was a perk and it truly meant something and it helped you elevate in your career and what you want to do and after your career, because you can't cash in those 5 stars when this is all over. You can't, there's no pay window for how many 5-star matches you've had that's going to make you happy when wrestling's over. So I'm just not, like, we can go down this for, I'm just such not a fan of that ranking system. It's subjective, right? It's, some people dig it and some people don't. And for the most part, I think that the wrestling public in general, they know it doesn't hold any water, but it definitely doesn't determine who they are. I think it's just the progression of, it's like anything else. These were dirt sheets and you had to subscribe and it was a piece of paper or like a whole pamphlet. Now you can just go on the internet and everybody can get to it. So how do I make my product more relevant? Well, I'm going to rate these guys,
Yeah, I think for me with Dave Meltzer, and I'm not going to take away what he's accomplished and everything, but it's at what point did it go from news to critic?
Yeah.
I mean, that's not news. That's just being critical. That's being a critic. And that's kind of the problem that I have. And it's definitely seemed to get a little bit more biased throughout the years. And
Yeah.
who he's a buddy with, I think there's no doubt they obviously get higher things. Not that they're all great wrestlers per se. But
Right.
yeah, I mean, to me, like, how's that news?
And that's the thing. There's a big difference between critiquing something and criticizing.
Yeah.
And that platform criticizes everything and tears it down and builds up what it wants to build up. Well, then, and so I suggest this: if they have all this platform to do this, then why are they not suggesting what others need to do to get up to this 5-star rating? How can you make their work better? How can you make them better entertainers, better professional wrestlers, better athletes, better people? Maybe that's what he should be working on. If he wants to truly contribute to this business, instead of just making a living off of it, then maybe his expertise should be in telling people how to achieve a consistent 5-star rating, or this will get you to Japan if I see you do this, or this is what I've learned over my 40 years in the business, and this is what I've seen. Maybe that's what needs to happen.
Yeah, good point.
And now I'll probably be blocked on Twitter.
It happens. Maybe one day we'll make the unblock. I'm not counting on it though. Too many jokes. It's that you listen to that Cornette, right? He'll get you going on that. I just didn't expect to join the block club with Jim. Yeah. No, so I did want to ask one more thing here. So we've been talking about wrestling these days. Probably not a good time to get into the Vince McMahon talk because, Bill, I have a feeling by the time we launch and right before, we should probably talk about it then because a hell of a lot's going to change. Between now and then. It'll be old news by the time we release this here in mid February. But today's product, you and I have talked about AEW. The skill set aspect is really great in it. I agree with you. And I even like the rankings on the win-loss.
Love it.
It doesn't do much for me if it's not meaningful. So they have to continue to make it meaningful, then highlight it and make sure it goes somewhere with it. So I have no problem with that. I do like that. But I sure liked the work they were doing when CM Punk was there. Maybe I'm just a big CM Punk fan, but I really hated to see him go after that comeback.
It's that, man, it's that thing of every time we as a group of wrestlers and wrestling and things, it's every time you've got something going great, we just have this ability to screw the pooch. But I think a lot of that comes to me because I agree with you. When Punk came back, good business was being done.
Yeah.
As far as ratings and all those things, it was up, and their houses were up, and what they were doing was moving in the right direction. I think the problem is, and this is my opinion. My opinion, and I learned this a long time ago from some very smart men. You cannot be in charge and be one of the boys.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, what drew the line in the sand for Punk. I wasn't there. I don't speak to any of those guys, not because I don't like them. I just don't have, that kind of relationship. But he came out and blew his top because everybody in charge is on top. Everybody. So there's got to be that. And I think knowing Phil, like he wanted people to recognize he drew the house. But then you have these guys who are in charge doing what they want to do. And I think Tony Khan became and still is in that little bit of, he became a victim of his own success. He wants wrestling to change. He wants to do these great things, going back to the rankings that slowly drifted from what their storylines were going to be. But I think the thing with Punk and a lot of stuff that's going on is you can't be in control and be involved. And I think that was a big thing that led to Cody leaving. And then I saw it again and I know I'm drifting on it, but hopefully it's the same kind of conversation. You see Jeff Jarrett leave one company. He becomes the senior vice president of travel or live events, and now he's on TV every week. So there's gonna build that.
And they announced him as an executive. They announced him as an executive when he came in as a heel. I thought that was interesting.
Every executive are top dogs. So when you have guys coming in there and proving from their merchandise and the numbers are doing, proving that they're doing well, then that should be the conversation. So this is the part of wrestling, and as it progresses, people are changing the road work of it. But at the same time, it still comes down to money and egos. And you can't, I'm a big believer in you cannot be involved and be in charge. And I think that's what I believe that's what hurts AEW. And you can't have people. And again, if you follow the news, people wanting to leave, people asking for leases, the Regal, everything that's going on. Why are certain people allowed to leave? Certain people aren't. Well, we're going to treat the wrestling business differently, but it's still muddy waters when you let the people that are running the asylum be a part of the craziness.
I'll say one thing, Bill. I dabble in the corporate world in a director role, not quite VP. But I will say that if I got in a fight with somebody that I worked with or managed, it didn't matter if I started it or not, I'd be fired.
Yeah.
And I think that was the interesting thing for me. And that's a wrestling thing, because in any other setting, you got to be gone. You got to be terminated. There's no ands or buts.
And we'll put it to you. Who are you? How long have you been there? What have you really brought to the table? All these things. Well, if I'm the EVP, you can't fire me. You can't do that. You can't do that. I can do this. Okay, this one was suspended for 2 weeks. The others were suspended for 3 weeks. This guy was let go because he was part of it. The locker room gets together because they don't like what happened. And so they have a say in it. And without being there, Tony's got to do the kumbaya on 3 different sides. And how do you make everybody happy and still take pictures with them and be their friends in social media and all these things. So there's that thing about professional wrestling that is changing again, because truly here's where you get in trouble for saying it, but I can only talk in Billisms, right? The inmates are running the asylum. But it comes down to what Tony does and how he handles it. Now, I'm sure Tony could be the biggest heel and hated man in professional wrestling if he put his foot down and ran it the way maybe he sees it different and tries to run a different way. Now Tony Khan's the bigger no good dirty dog, and then all of a sudden Vince is the great guy again, and that's all you hear about is people say, well, they want to jump back with Hunter. Well, now Vince, they want to jump back here and they want to just wrestle, man. Just be happy where you are and quit looking for. And that's the thing. I don't think anybody's happy with what they're doing. There's got to be the end game is about them. It's not wrong. We're all individuals. We're all independent contractors. But the end game is what's in it for me, not what's in the best interest of, And I'm hopeful, and I think AEW has a great product. I think the roster's talented as all get out. I think there's amazing athletes, men and women. Um, I don't think there's enough opportunities for them to all get the reps they need, because right now they're mostly a TV company, and some of the stuff on TV to me is a little wonky. But that's wrestling, right? So you work on it. But it goes
They've
back
got a
to
big
that
ass
5-star
roster.
thing. They got a tremendous roster.
It's huge too. They have a lot of people. You're right. There's not even enough time and day or a platform for a lot of them to do anything.
No, he could have 4 more shows and run ROH full time and still not get everybody the reps they need. And
he has about
at
the
the end
same.
of the day, Cody Rhodes is a wrestler.
Yeah,
he's an entertainer. He's an actor. He's all these things, but he's a wrestler. And I think he saw that it wasn't going to get anywhere there, and he wanted to go where he could wrestle and do his craft.
Yeah,
big leap of faith.
It was, but the work he accomplished on the independent scene after Stardust was, and just like Drew McIntyre when he exited originally, that was great stuff. It was needed, I think, as part of him as a person and in a wrestling career sense.
Yes. I think when guys have I think you'll hear this from 90% of the men and women, for whatever reason, have been released, let go, their contract expired. When they had to go out and either refine themselves as wrestlers or something else, and then had the opportunity to come back, they appreciated the first part of that journey more because it all made sense. But we're in not anymore, but back when we were in 300 days a year and go mode, you never had time to sit and think about all those things. So kind of the best part of being out of the business is then appreciating it again and what you did get accomplished and what you did do and what you do have to offer, But I think we're so worked up on that. And I always like to hear from the cats that have either gone away for whatever reason and then come back. They appreciate it more. They're having more fun. They're smarter. They're better at what they do. They're better storytellers. They're better people in and out of the ring. I don't want to play bones with you. Talking to my monster, my horse. But that's like I have that's kind of like my opinion on it is there's so many opportunities for these guys, and if they just listen, and I'll say this, and I know we'll talk about it again. Seth Rollins and Sami Zayn were the 2 biggest, hardest guys to get to trust the process. They wanted to fight me and they hated my guts. And I think the world of them as young men. And now Seth is a family man and Sami doing what he's doing because I knew that's what was going to happen. But just trust the process. And then once everybody got a feel from now, look at them. They're it. They're the future. They're laying the groundwork. And I'm so happy to see that. Kofi, trust the process. Look at Kofi Kingston, man. Look at The Miz. Look at Gallows. Look at all these guys, man. Just trust the process. You don't have to like your coach. You don't have to like your boss. Do your job. Pick up things along the way. Trust the process. And when the time is right, someone's going to give you the green light and go do you. But you've got to earn that, or at least you had to earn it. Now, everybody comes in expecting it because they got that ranking. They got that notoriety. Hey, if this guy said I'm good, screw you. What do you know, Dean Malenko? What do you know, Jerry Lynn? Billy Gunn, why are you a producer? Dustin, why are you a producer? Why Mark Henry, Big Show, all these guys are the producers there now. Molly Holly, Hurricane over here. These guys doing this. What do they know? They're not ranked anymore. They never got ranked. So why would I listen to those guys? Because they have that experience and they've been, fruitful. They've been successful, and that's why they're in that position. But nowadays, it doesn't hold as much water with the young cats coming in. You couldn't get me out of a locker room when the veterans were talking. You couldn't get me not to drive Ted DiBiase and Haku. You couldn't get me not to listen to One Man Gang talk because I knew within the story there was a lesson that wouldn't affect me at the time, but would come into play somewhere down the road. And I know that's the old fart in me going, and now I'm just going down the wormhole. But I think that's the change since I started. And I'm sure people that started before me feel that way, or at least some kind of way like that. But then again, you got to throw it back to this is what everybody's allowed the business to become. So you can't fight City Hall, you know?
I will say one thing. I'm going to trust the process of this podcast we've created here because this was a hell of an hour, a little over an hour now
Cool.
spent, Bill. So it's great, and I think it's going to have awesome things to come. So trust the process. That's what I'm going to take away from this one.
Yeah. That's and I think in the DeMott Mansion, that's kind of the golden rule: is wrestling rules apply. Trust the process. You know, my kids are growing up that way. You don't understand it now, but trust it. It's going to make sense. It's, you know, and with this podcast, trust us. You're all going to have fun. You're all going to hopefully learn something, and we're going to change your mindset about more than just wrestling. Maybe about life. Maybe about, you know, what we both do. Jeff and I both do on a day to day. But at the end of the day, if we leave with a smile, going, "Hey, that was a heck of a show," then we're doing our job.
Absolutely. So we'll end it with some call to actions here. Yeah. I'm putting together the website now. I actually own
Cool.
BillDeMott.com, which incredible. So between me owning BillDeMott.com and you owning the Bill DeMott Experience, we will be sending people to the website via both of those. So yeah, that's where
Great.
you're going to find everything. Right now I'm drafting it as BillDeMott.com. We'll tie in the experience. Yeah, Bill, moving forward, you might want to make sure you purchase your name domain.
Jeez,
But it's in safe hands for now.
See, I learned something right now in the first episode.
Yeah, I figured you'd like that. That was a surprise. But no, so yeah, if you're enjoying this, share it, please.
Yeah.
I know Bill, obviously, you have a well-established career and a very valid point of view on these things. So I'm hoping people enjoy it. If you do, just share it, follow it on your podcast app, subscribe to it on YouTube, and just join us along for this journey. Every week we'll touch up on something new and maybe we'll all grow from it, like you said, Bill.
I look forward to it, man. It's a lot of fun. I like Boomcaster. Thank you, Boomcaster. This is cool.
Yep. Between Boomcaster and Podcast. All right. This is Jeff Townsend of Jeff Townsend Media. Thank you for checking out the podcast on YouTube. If you're enjoying the show, please subscribe to it, share it with the world, share it with all your friends, your mothers, your brothers, your sisters, everybody. Also, there are plenty of other videos for you to listen to and watch in the meantime. This podcast is also available on all major podcast listening platforms. If you want to learn more about it, go to BillDeMott.com.